How's it going, guys? Coach Highway from GameLeap here, and in today's video we are going to be covering one pro trick for every character's ultimate in Overwatch 2. Before we get into it, you guys need to come check out our website where we have over 50 and soon to be 100 guides with dozens more coming in every day. Follow the link here and join us today to get step-by-step guides on how to improve and climb the leaderboards. Alright, let's do this alphabetically. Starting us off strong, we have Ana, and she really has a pretty straightforward ultimate with few tricks outside of beginner level stuff. The best advice that I can give is that you can actually reduce the sensitivity on nano boost targeting in order to reduce the amount of boostio moments that you get. Simply go to options and on the right select Ana as the hero to change the sensitivity on her nano boost. Next up is ASHE, and you can actually build Bob while Bob is actively fighting alongside you, so be sure to use your dynamite to follow up Bob's knockup, as it will do a lot of damage and begin charging your next ultimate. Also, when throwing Bob, aim him at a wall so that in case he misses the enemy team, you can still put him in an effective position. Next is BAP, and your ultimate can move with moving objects like the payload or elevators, meaning you can actually give your team a mobile damage boost field in the right situations. It's not always best used this way, but it's an interesting use in different circumstances and adds a fair bit of creativity to the ult. Next we have Bastion, and honestly it's hard to even give Bastion an ultimate trick since the short time he was even in the game, the best trick was to spam zoom out for unlimited shots. His ultimate even with this trick was pretty bad, so we're just gonna kind of have to wait and see what happens when he comes back. I'm sorry Bastion mains, but there's just really nothing that I can do. Next up is Brig, and Brig's ultimate is just another insanely straightforward ult. It gives overhealth, which makes it particularly powerful against anti-grenades or Junker Queen ult, but otherwise just be sure to not overextend as though you were invincible and try to use it to begin very strong pushes. Okay, next is CASSIDY, and High Noon would be a strong ultimate if you weren't so damn slow. Luckily, LUCIO is very meta right now, so just be sure to ask for the resources you need in order to chase enemies and coordinate with LUCIO's speed amp to give you the much needed boost in order to run after the people you get a lock on. If you don't have a LUCIO, just be sure to communicate with whatever you do have that can help your ultimate, such as Sim's teleporter or defense matrix, that kind of thing. And if push comes to shove, you can always just use it to reload. Just High Noon and then cancel, and now you have a full clip. Next is D.Va, and the best piece of advice I can give is practice using your ultimate immediately after you use your boosters. That way you can have a fast, hard to read, and a consistent ult trajectory and get a bunch more value. Also, if you use your ult on the top of a ledge, you can walk into the destructing mech in order to push it off and surprise enemies hiding from it down below before it explodes. Next up is Doom, and your Doom cooldowns actually count down while you're in your ult, and they do so quicker, so you should try to make sure that before you actually use your ult and land, that you'll have them all back and be ready to fight, giving you the best edge possible. Next is Echo, and when you're about to dupe, use your sticky bombs right before you do so in order to maximize your damage and give you an immediate advantage on whoever may be staring at you while you're in the ult animation. Be careful ulting in the open as well, since you'll be stuck sitting still, and enemies with good timing can knock you out of ult immediately after your invincibility ends. Next up is Genji, and this might be the most important basic tip for Genji in general. When you use your ultimate, be sure to ask your team for resources and dash upwards into the air to give them an easy sightline on you, and to give yourself sight on the enemy team's position to help you know where to blade and dash. You want to do this because immediately after you pull your dragon blade, you actually get your dash back, so going up into the air isn't that big of a deal because you'll get your dash immediately after and let you dash right back down. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to like and subscribe. And moving on, we have HANZO. HANZO can actually charge an arrow while he is casting dragons, meaning that you can have a surprise arrow ready for those pesky flankers who try to push you while you're occupied and standing still. Simply hold left click while using dragons and you'll have a fully charged shot ready to go afterwards. Next is Junker Queen, and Junker Queen's momentum allows her to slide up props and some obstacles, giving her a super interesting trajectory that can be used to really get the sudden drop on enemies. Look for ramps and cars to slide yourself off of in order to attack high grounds and catch enemies off guard. Now this does take a little bit of practice, so be sure to go into a custom game and fool around for a little bit. Next is Drunk Rat, and if you push your rip tire up against a wall, it makes the audio significantly harder for the enemy to hear. Just use your tire and leave it up against a wall for a few seconds to get the drop on enemies with a quieter tire. Next is KIRIKO, and KIRIKO's ult is very straightforward and doesn't have many niche tricks with it. The important thing is timing. Combine it with other ults, or be sure that you're using it to engage and as early into a fight as possible. Next is Lucio, and avoid using his ult while super high in the air or wall riding high up, and don't jump before you ult. This will minimize the amount of time it takes for you to land and get the health out to your team. Also, another little trick against EMP, you can hide around a corner to avoid it and then deliver your barrier to your team as soon as the Sombra goes for it. Next is Mei, and Mei's ult also goes on the straightforward list. Make sure you have your wall to stop escaping enemies, and watch for enemy cooldowns like MOIRA's Fade before you use it, just to make escape that much harder for your opponent. Next up is Mercy, and for Mercy's ult, just be sure to use the extended range to your advantage to stay far out of danger. Hit scans will also be looking to kill you when you're ulting, so use walls and corners, and don't forget that you're a monster for contesting points while you're in your Valk. Next is MOIRA, and try to always send out an orb right before you use your ult in order to combo either healing or damage, since you can't use your orbs while you're in your Cole. Furthermore, try to use a longer angle in order to maximize how many people you can hit at once, instead of pushing straight into the enemy team and making everybody harder to line up. Next we have Orisa, and you can actually ult enemies off the map by jumping off yourself and using your ult as you fall. This obviously has some big risk attached, but against slow or clumped up enemy teams, you can get an insane amount of value out of this trick. I've actually seen full team kills into the pit on Ilios well, for example. Next is Pharah, and always fire a rocket right before you barrage to get a more secured kill on a target. The 120 or 150 with damage boost initial damage will soften up your enemy and make the smaller barrage damage much more likely to secure at least one pick. Next is Reaper, and my best advice is stop running into the enemy team before ulting. This telegraphs your ultimate very clearly to the enemy team and lets them react easily with Matrix or other cooldowns. Instead, hide on the flank ahead of time or go for a TP into the enemy backline in order to get a surprise angle. Also, much like Pharah, fire a shot right before you ult to soften an enemy up and get a more guaranteed pick on at least one target. Next is Rein, and Rein's ultimate can actually climb up small high grounds and ramps, giving you some opportunity for surprise shatters on unsuspecting targets. Test around and see what you can find, and learn to look for these opportunities in game to leave your enemy confused as you kill them. Next up is ROADHOG, and ROADHOG's ult is an incredibly powerful tool for countering Dragon Blade or Primaling Monkey, or really any ultimate that gets easily shut down from knockback. So look for these fantastic opportunities to take enemy playmakers out of the game in their most important moments. Next we have Sigma, and you want to try to hit an enemy with a left click right before they fall rather than when you lift them up early on. This will give the enemy healers less chance of being able to heal them before the drop damage finishes them off from your primary fire, whereas if you hit them in the beginning, an enemy can see your damage and try to save their teammate. Next we have SOJOURN, and honestly the best tip I can give is to not always worry about headshots so much. SOJOURN can do so much damage with her rail with constant body shots that she can just use it to get 1 or 2 picks easily. Of course, this changes if they use something like Transcendence, which gives a lot of burst heals, making body shots less effective. If you have cracked aim, then obviously headshots are better, but if you find yourself on SOJOURN against mobile, hard to hit targets, go for consistency over potential. Next up is Soldier, and pressing your heal pad button just before you ult will allow you to cancel the heal pad animation, giving you a healing pad to stand in while you're visoring without wasting precious time during the ultimate itself. Next is Sombra, and make sure you have a clear target post EMP, and don't forget to combo your normal hack on a target to keep them out of the fight for significantly longer. Simply EMP, wait for a second, and then rehack an enemy to make them rage and secure a more frequent pick on them. Next is Sim, and Sim's wall is best used to either negate enemy ultimates like tac visors or diva bombs, etc., or it's best used for initiating pushes. Try not to just think of where you are standing now with her wall, but where you want to go. That way you can angle it to provide you with a shield for your entire push rather than just the beginning. Remember that teammates can dance back and forth on either side, so if you have to just send it straight down a choke, go for it. Next is Torb, and since you cannot use cooldowns when ulting on Torb, don't forget to use your overload beforehand so that you can have the extra HP and movement speed while using Molten Core. This makes you harder to kill due to the HP, and the movement speed allows you to chase down enemies and drop lava on them as they run away. Next is Tracer, and there's actually 3 different tips that come to mind for Tracer, and I feel like I need to say them all because one is niche, one is easy, and one is hard. The first beginner tip I have is don't be afraid to use your pulse bomb on tanks, even if it isn't going to get a pick, since a sudden amount of burst damage on a tank can be enough to clean up the pick after the fact. The niche tip is to use your pulse bomb on the ground next to sleeping targets instead of on them, since the stick damage will wake them up otherwise. The final trick, which is definitely for more advanced tracers, is that you can start your pulse bomb animation and shortly after blink at the enemy, giving them less time to react. This is particularly potent against enemies like GENJI who may reflect otherwise, or CASSIDY who can stick you with his magnetic grenade if you stay in his range for too long. Next up is Widow, and Widow has another straightforward ultimate. Just be sure to use your walls when they actually matter. Lots of Widows waste their wall hacks at the end of a fight or when it's 5 versus 2 for their team. Wait until the enemy team is just about to push and then use it to give yourself the best chance of landing big headshots. Also, for enemy Widows, be sure to keep in mind that wall hacks last for 15 seconds, so you can use in-game timers to know exactly when they are done. Next is Winston, and your ultimate will give you an instant 1000 HP, so you want to use it after you start getting low to get the max value out of this quote-unquote healing aspect. Instead of diving in and priming immediately, dive in, deal some damage just normally, and once the enemy gets you down to 200 or so HP, activate it to increase the amount of damage an enemy needs to do to kill you. Next up is Wrecking Ball, and his ult is really based more on general awareness and timing than any specific tricks. The best trick is to just make sure that you use it while you're in the air so that you can slam immediately after and potentially catch unsuspecting enemies in a minefield as you lock them in place. Next up is Zarya, and my best Zarya tip is to keep in mind that Grav can be an equally effective defensive tool as an offensive tool. Is your team having troubles with nanoblading Genjis all game? Use your Grav to shut his blade down and get him picked, giving your team a huge advantage. Our final hero is Zen, and my biggest tip is to always be sure to have your Harmony and your Discord Orb active before you trance. That way you can maximize your ability value since you cannot use your orbs while ulting. And there you have it, 35 solid tips of varying difficulty and usefulness on every hero. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in a bit. Take care and peace.